Hi everybody, Arnaldo here broadcasting from Fidelio's Frequency. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'd like to talk to you about some records that are regarded as masterpieces or landmark albums, or just some of, or maybe the best album by a specific artist. These albums are not great sounding records, whether because they were recorded with not the best equipment in the best studio, or because the artist was going for a specific sound, and that's why they probably sound a little weird and not as polished. In any event, I like to show them to you, but first I'd like to preface by saying the inspiration for this video, for making this video, came from another video that I saw on a different channel, YouTube channel, and I'm sure most of you who watch my channel are probably familiar with Melinda Murphy's channel, and if you're not, I have a link in the description below to her channel. And she published a video a few weeks ago that got me thinking, because she was sharing her thoughts or her intention to get rid of some records in her collection. Some of the records were duplicate records, of which she had better sounding versions. And in other cases, there were records where she wasn't really happy with the version that she had, didn't like the way it sounded. And one of those that caught my attention, and on which I actually made a comment about, is this U2, The Unforgettable Fire. And my comment was basically saying that I really think that it's hard to find a spectacular sounding version of this record. I personally have two versions. I've had the German version, which is the pressing that I bought originally, and this UK version. And they don't sound that much different. When I actually purchased the first copy back in 1984, whenever I would listen to it, I'd actually turn up the treble, because there's really no top end, no treble on this record. It's recorded intentionally the way it was. U2 were going for a specific sound when they hired Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois to record, engineer, produce, and mix this album. They wanted to step away from the aseptic studio sound that they had gotten in the first three records that were produced by Steve Lillywhite, and they wanted to capture more a live room, the ambiance of the room. Hence, they relocated, instead of picking a studio, to Slane Castle, where actually they lived during the recording of this album. And the record sounds the way it does, not because it was poorly recorded, but because they were capturing a unique sound. In my opinion, this ranks amongst my top 3 albums by U2. It has probably by far my favorite U2 track, which is The Unforgettable Fire. Amazing track where there is an incredible string arrangement, and in my opinion, the best vocal performance by Bono. Of course, it also has a sort of homecoming, pride in the name of love, and the most claustrophobic sounding song on this album is Indian Summer Sky. But it all comes down to the final result, and that's probably why I love it. I have grown to love the way this sounds. It's not your audiophile record. It's not detailed, but it definitely has a specific mood. And yes, I get it. Maybe some people may not like it, or maybe it's just not their thing. This next record actually did not sell very well when it was originally released in 1967. I'm not really sure the author of the quote. It may have been the head of the band. I'm not going to spoil it for you by saying his name. Basically, it sold 300 copies, but everyone that bought this album at the time went out and formed a band. Of course, now you know, very inspirational record, has been reappreciated over the last almost 50 years. And I'm talking about the debut by the Velvet Underground and Nico, called just Velvet Underground and Nico. It's not called Andy Warhol, but Andy Warhol was actually The producer, let's quote unquote, producer of this album, as well as the author of the artwork. Iconic artwork. This is the banana that was already peeled. At the time, it came with a repealable sticker, which had the yellow on top, and you could peel it off and reveal the flesh-colored banana. Yes, there's many underlying messages to the flesh-colored banana, but we won't get into that. Some people hate this record. Some people think it's too artsy. Some people think that it is overrated. Personally, it took me a while to get into it, and I think maybe that's really the key, that you should listen to it quite a bit. I think Nico's voice can be an acquired taste on some of the tracks, but you cannot deny the greatness of Lou Reed's songwriting. Sunday Morning, I'm Waiting for the Man, Femme Fatale, Venus in Furs, All Tomorrow's Parties, Heroin, I'll Be Your Miro, European Sun. I could go on and on. This, in my opinion, is a landmark album, a blueprint for I don't know how many genres. In any event, poorly recorded. And I think it was because they really didn't have that much money. Andy Warhol is not a music producer, and they were a band that were at the beginning and probably not very well experienced in the studio. Nonetheless, the music is what matters, not so much the sound of it. And I doubt there'll ever be a audiophile version of this. So I guess whichever version you want to pick up is probably as good as any. So The Velvet Underground and Nico. So much has been talked about and written about this next record, whether it be for the music, but actually also for its recording and the different mixes that exist of this recording. And I'm talking about the third record by the Stooges, and at the time they were going by Iggy Pop and the Stooges. The name of the album is Raw Power. Their third album, as I said, that came out in 1973. At the time, they were signed to David Bowie's management company, Tony DeFry's management company, Main Man, and they relocated to London to record and mix this album. Well, as soon as they delivered the album to Tony DeFry's, he objected to releasing it because he didn't like the way it sounded, and drafted in David Bowie to actually remix it. Iggy Pop conceded, and with one exception, and the version that was released at the time has David Bowie mixing all the tracks except for the first track, which is Search and Destroy. That was the official version that came out at the time, but for many years after, various bootlegs circulated with Iggy's mix until 1996, when Sony wanted to release and reissue this album on CD. They asked Iggy Pop to finally give it a proper Iggy remix. And initially reluctant, he decided to take on the task and actually delivered a very different mix, much more raw, with the guitars blasting. And he was quite proud of his mix, although he praised David Bowie's mix in saying that it was very creative for the time. He just felt that he wanted to give it a more raw approach and sound. Other band members, James Williamson and Ron Ashton, actually did not like Iggy's mix and continued to prefer the work that David Bowie had done at the time on the original album. So however you put it, whether you listen to the David Bowie mix or the Iggy Pop mix, personally, I don't think any of them are astounding or audiophile by any means, or even well recorded. Nonetheless, Raw Power is a fantastic album. Spearheaded, probably, Iggy is considered the godfather of punk, and definitely a blueprint for that genre. Those of you who watch my channel know that I am a Kiss fan, and how could I not include probably one of the all-time worst sounding great albums? in this video by the band Kiss. Their second album, Hotter Than Hell, released in 1974, in October of 1974. What a mess, this album. Artistically has some fantastic songs. Hotter Than Hell, Parasite, Going Blind, Got to Choose, All the Way. There are so many, Let Me Go Rock and Roll, so many great Kiss songs on here, but probably their worst sounding album, probably one of the worst sounding albums ever made. Still, very dear to me. I bought it when I was 9, I think, and I've loved it all the time. At the time, I didn't even know how bad it sounded until you start listening to other records. They left New York City to go and record in Los Angeles. Same recording engineer as their first album, Richie Wise, I believe, and Kenny Kerner. The first album actually sounds really good sonically. It was pretty well recorded for 1973, 74. This one, and I've read quotes of Richie Wise, the engineer at the time, saying that he was in a really bad place at the time that he was recording this album. He kind of like checked out, moved to LA, and was still dealing with the adjustment to moving to LA. And he later apologized for the sound of this record, kind of like a missed opportunity, because if you listen to it, you can tell that the drums sound like they were underwater almost, and the crashing cymbals are all over the place. But nonetheless, a great album by Kiss, Hotter Than Hell, badly recorded. This next album falls more in the category of, it's not entirely badly recorded, but the drums sound so bad. They sound so thin, almost like cardboard boxes. And I don't know how that came about, because Roy Thomas Baker is actually known for a specific sound. But this album was not mic'd properly, recorded properly. I don't know what's going on. Some tracks sound really good, other tracks not so good, especially the opening track with the weird volume changes. I don't know what's going on with jazz. And Queen, after the huge success, especially after the huge success of News of the World with We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions, you'd think that they'd put more attention to the recording of the next album. Not so much. Some fantastic songs on here. Fat Bottom Girls, Let Me Entertain You, Jealousy, Bicycle Race, Don't Stop Me Now. Another missed opportunity in my opinion. I wish this album sounded better. I've listened to different versions of it and it still sounds very thin, just very weird sound. I want to say some bad choices. They were at a fantastic studio, the Montreux Studios in Switzerland, from which they have cut some amazing records. Queen often recorded there, but this one kind of misses the mark. The next album actually is my favorite of this artist. Originally recorded on a compact cassette with a 4-track portable recorder, and recorded in, I believe, his home. And it was intended as demos that he would later present to his band so that they could flesh out and fully produce them. Didn't end up that way, because they did attempt to record them, but his producer and manager at the time said, maybe we should try and release them in the original form that you recorded them. And I'm talking about Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska. My favorite Bruce Springsteen album. I love the mood of it. And in this case, I don't think any polished version of these songs would have added anything to the beauty of this album. Very lo-fi, intentionally lo-fi because they were supposed to be just demos, but the rawness, the intimacy of the recording shines on this album. Amazing songs: Nebraska, Atlantic City, State Trooper, My Father's House, Reason to Believe. This is my favorite Bruce Springsteen album I don't think you'll find a really great sounding version because the source material, the source tape is not of the best. And this is the plangent version. It's a reissue. It's not an original. I do have an original, but I've been listening actually to this version. But for sure, a standout album in terms of music and content, Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska. Now, this could be a much longer video. The list could go on for quite a bit because there are so many great albums, in my opinion, that are poorly recorded or just don't sound that great. But I just wanted to end with one of my favorite bands of all time that produced a record that I think is their worst sounding one, and it kind of impacts on how much people approach this record. They may not like it as much because it just has a weird sound to it. I'm talking about REM and their third album called Fables of the Reconstruction. For this album, the band relocated to the UK because they chose producer Joe Boyd to produce their next record. And although their first two records were produced and recorded very well, this one has a unique sound. And I know it wasn't because of the skills of Joe Boyd, because he produced some great sounding, amazing sounding records for Fairport Convention and for Nick Drake, another one of my favorites. But this one, I don't know, maybe he'd lost his touch, and it's such a shame. And the reason why I'm presenting it is because this album has some fantastic songs on it. Feeling Gravity's Pull, Driver 8, Can't Get There From Here, Life and How to Live It, I feel could be appreciated so much more had they been better mixed or better recorded. I don't know what's going on. I do like the folky, almost kind of Baroque sound. And actually this is the first time, and then later gotten even more Baroque sounding with Out of Time. But that album is impeccably recorded. This one, not so much. I actually think the last track on the album, Wendell G, is probably when actually the album opens up. And maybe it's just my taste. I wish this album sounded better. I don't know. Maybe you can leave a comment if you think maybe this is the worst sounding REM album, and it's kind of a shame, right? So let me know your thoughts. Did I miss something? I probably did. Some by choice, because I don't want this video to last and bore you with a 30+ minute video. But definitely chime in. Let me know your thoughts on the albums that I talked about, not sounding so great, or maybe suggest some other ones that I may have missed. In any event, thank you so much for watching. For all of you that are currently subscribed and that faithfully tune in, a special thanks to them. And for those new viewers that just found or stumbled across my channel, please consider looking at some of the old videos in my library on the channel, and please consider subscribing. It doesn't cost you anything, just a click of that subscribe button. And once again, thank you again for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.